I mean, if you really want to get technical about the whole thing, Rocky couldn't carry my jockstrap.
The 70s and 80s possessed a slew of heavyweight stars who captivated the masses. Ali, Frazier, Foreman, and Tyson ensnared the audience with their personalities and display of skill. But if skill is defined as repeatable control, safety, efficiency, and system integrity, then the Eastern assassin Larry Holmes sits at the top.
In the closed stance, I call it the open T position, where you're the bladed stem and your opponent is the squared top of the letter T with space in between, which is very important. Due to being squared, the defensive system your opponent is using now has holes, and at the same time their ability to rotate the hips to generate power has been drastically diminished. So now you can run numbers from a less defensible and less risky advantageous position.
Larry would predominantly use fundamental steps as his primary means of moving while maintaining his base. Every trap begins with Holmes setting his feet first, not throwing punches first. By positioning himself as the stem of the T, Holmes gained direct access to the opponent's center line, allowing himself to land offense unimpeded. Holmes used the open T position not to rush offense, but to govern the next exchange. Holmes was also highly adept at utilizing lateral traps. He employed simple lateral traps, layered lateral traps, and pursuit-based lateral traps by shuffling in one direction and then transitioning the fundamental steps in the opposite direction. He added complexity through foot feints, further delaying the opponent and drawing them into counter offense while out of position. Holmes also used pendulum bounces to initiate lateral traps. By timing his jab during the bounce, he encouraged the opponent to follow. In typical lateral trap fashion, Holmes would set his feet first, forcing the opponent to change direction late and compromise their base, which he then punished with counter offense. Holmes additionally employed disengagement traps. He initiated these when forward pressure escalated, using masked retreats to create a false sense of momentum. Even while disengaging, Holmes kept his hips under him. Probing jabs and no-step jabs controlled distance and concealed small step-backs, causing opponents to overcommit or throw single power shots without a set base. These were then punished with step-back counters, pull counters, or counter combinations. When pundits mention the jab of Larry Holmes, they're normally only referring to it as a weapon. That's a cursory description of something that's much more nuanced. Holmes' lead hand is an operating system that the rest of his game connects to. The first layer of a thorough jab system is being able to use it as an initiator of offense, drawing it from outside range to control distance and to belay the advance of an opponent, looking to close that gap with forward pressure. Probing with the jab can be used as a change of pace from a standard jab to either force a reaction from the op with a sudden delay in delivery. A probe is informational pressure, not kinetic pressure. Probing can lull the opponent into a false sense of security due to the lead hand becoming a touch versus a fast impact of a conventional jab, creating a sense of security that can quickly change with offense delivered at a higher rate of speed than the rhythm set by the probe. It's necessary to have both in your game. Holmes also made sure to utilize his jab as a reset after throwing a combination. He'd follow up with a jab to return to a position poised to strike or defend. This was a decision of post-exchange governance. Even if the opponent would begin to defend the jab, he'd make a note of how they would defend it and make an adjustment to strike them with the opening created by the defensive reaction. The jab here is not to score, but to reassert initiative and gather feedback for future openings. Holmes was aware of the dangers of a single mid-range jab, so he'd often throw his jab and take his head offline with some modality of defense, whether that be a slip jab, pulled-in jab, jabbing and pulling, often denying the opportunity for a jab count. His jab could also replace his guard as a defensive layer at times. By throwing the jab right as the opponent attempts to initiate offense, he breaks up the threat before it becomes viable. Splitting a combination with a jab, denying it from landing, or even finishing is a form of defense. This is textbook offense that prevents offense, that we'll just label as preventative defense. A jab with good technical form is it going from where the hand is directly to the target with no additional movement or loading. Holmes has been able to showcase this across a 15-round fight, where stamina concerns are a guarantee, not a suspicion. His jab doesn't degrade because it isn't based on speed or power. It's based on positioning, timing, and decision economy. A defensive system with only one or two layers isn't a system. It's a collection of reactions that may or may not hold under pressure. Larry Holmes operated from a multi-layered defensive structure that allowed him to transition seamlessly between tools based on the threat presented. That adaptability is the foundation of defensive economy. Fewer decisions, clear responses, minimal wasted movement. One of the primary pillars of Holmes' defense was distance control. He used his lead hand as a proximity defender, not merely to block punches, but to single when an opponent had violated his preferred range. From there, he employed small corrective stepbacks to reestablish space, rather than conceding ground unnecessarily. When opponents stepped in, Holmes often mirrored the entry, while angling or shuffling laterally, forcing him to reset before striking from a compromised base. The jab itself functioned as a distance management tool, disrupting entries and maintaining positional authority. You can't discuss the long guard without mentioning Holmes. As one of its most prominent users, he demonstrated a nuanced understanding of its function beyond passive coverage. He used the long guard both to maintain distance and to press his advantage on the front foot, employing controlled punch traffic to disrupt offensive volleys. Open hand catches, forearm parries, and extended frames allowed him to transition from defense into pins, posts, and frames that limited the opponent's ability to punch freely. Holmes also understood the limitations of hand fighting. If punch traffic could not keep pace with incoming offense, he prioritized base integrity and full body movement rather than forcing the exchange. When offense slipped past his hands and footwork was unavailable, he had no hesitation transitioning into B-slot slips and pulls. Very rarely did Holmes default to a static high guard. Holmes' counterpunching ability further reinforced his defensive economy. Slip counters, catch counters, forearm parries flowed naturally into a full offensive arsenal. Missed or deflected offense was made costly, creating hesitation and discouraging opponents from throwing unstructured combinations. This wasn't counterpunching for volume, it was counterpunching as deterrence. In his prime, Holmes was also an effective clinch fighter with a strong understanding of momentum control. He used glove and arm controls to deny punching opportunities, single and double collar ties to break posture and steer opponents, tricep, elbow, overhook, and underhook controls to turn opponents into the ropes and reclaim open space. The clinch functioned as a positional reset for him, not a stalling tactic. An often overlooked component of defensive ability is mental stability. The capacity to remain composed under pressure is essential for making efficient defensive decisions. Regardless of opponent or moment, Holmes consistently maintained the clarity required to mitigate damage intelligently. He wasn't just hard to hit, he was hard to meaningfully engage. At the highest levels of boxing, physical controls act as the adhesive that binds offense and defense together. Larry Holmes possessed one of the most complete physical control games in boxing history. His use of controls was so embedded in his style that they appear across nearly every phase of his game, often without drawing attention to themselves. Holmes was a control freak who always looked for opportunities to deny the opponent a chance to do anything not on his terms. He is constantly re-establishing who owns the space, not chasing damage. You weren't able to enter his range freely. Any attempt to step into his space was met with probes, pins, and posts that functioned like a toll booth. Entry required payment, usually in the form of surrendered head position or hand freedom, in exchange for the opportunity to throw offense. Holmes also demonstrated a clear understanding that different controls serve different purposes. He used posts to the head to disrupt posture and balance, pins to the gloves and arms denied immediate offensive threats. When opponents managed to breach jab range, particularly behind an inactive high guard, Holmes applied lead and rear frames to continue denying them the ability to attack on their own terms. There are levels of proficiency within physical control, and Holmes operated at the highest tier. That level is defined by the ability to transition fluidly between offense and control without pause. Sequences such as control into offense and back into control, offense into control, into offense, and most notably, striking with one hand and immediately controlling with the same hand. This is exceptionally difficult to execute in real time. Holmes used controls as a bridge between offense and defense, allowing him to strike and instantly limit or shut down return fire. Some of his most punishing offensive sequences and stoppages were built on this exact principle. As fatigue sets in, most fighters see aspects of their game deteriorate. With Holmes, the opposite occurred. As rounds progressed and his legs became less active, he leaned more heavily into physical controls to maintain cohesion between his offense and defense. Control didn't disappear as he slowed, it became more pronounced. Larry Holmes approached fights as a series of problems to be solved, not exchanges to be won. His adaptability wasn't expressed through sudden stylistic shifts, but through controlled reallocations based on what was necessary to secure rounds. Early in the fight, Holmes prioritized information gathering and round stability. He didn't attempt to dominate immediately. Instead, he established a consistent jab output, limited right hand commitment, and conservative exchange selection. These feel-out rounds weren't passive, they were diagnostic. Holmes adjusted without abandoning identity. He modified inputs, not systems. To do this, he relied on two primary dispositions that he transitioned between as the fight evolved. A disposition is a strategic posture a fighter adopts to solve a specific problem, governing how they move, occupy space, and engage. In this disposition, Holmes prioritized positional control through lateral disengagement and spatial governance. He made opponents miss by being somewhere else, not by scrambling or retreating under pressure. Control was maintained through displacement, not collision. The jab remained authoritative, not busy, reinforcing space ownership while limiting engagement risk. He typically adopted this disposition when threat volatility increased, static dominance became unsafe, and positional advantage could be preserved through movement rather than contact. This was an homage, not an imitation. Holmes didn't borrow Ali's flash or theatrics. He borrowed the principle that position itself can undermine an opponent's confidence and offense. His time around Ali informed the concept, but the execution remained distinctly Holmes. When Holmes entered kill mode, he wasn't escalating emotionally or chasing exchanges. He was asserting structural dominance. In this disposition, Holmes occupied space with intent. His feet flattened, his base stabilized, and the ring compressed. Offensive setups became purposeful, with authority generated through posture, physical contact, and positional pressure rather than volume. Holmes typically engaged kill mode when offensive intent needed to be signaled clearly, the threat was manageable, space could be taken and punished without compromising control. This was not reckless hunting. It was controlled pressure applied under favorable conditions. Holmes was a round manager, not a momentum addict, a tactician who adjusted engagement frequency instead of identity. He chose moments rather than exchanges, understanding that winning was an accumulative process. That is adaptability without panic, not chaos, not reinvention, but disciplined reassessment inside a stable system. When people talk about Holmes' comeback, they usually stop at the 1988 loss to Mike Tyson. That's lazy history. The early 1990s return is where Holmes quietly proves something more important than dominance: skill longevity. Holmes adapts his system to match the realities of an aging body. The athletic advantages of his youth are gone. What remains is structure, timing, and decision-making that do not depend on speed. As Nazim Richardson said,
athleticism is a beast. When you're a young athlete, you faster than Roy Jones, faster than everybody. But when you slow down, we're going to find out, did you learn how to fight? Did you learn how to fight? See, a man who learns how to fight can keep that. At 60 years old, there'll still be people out there he can beat. He shouldn't be fighting, but at 60...
Holmes' jab still travels cleanly from point A to point B with no wasted motion. What changes is not form, but timing. The release varies just enough to remain difficult to anticipate, even without explosion. As an older fighter, offense must be selective. Prolonged exchanges favor the younger athlete. Holmes initiates only when conditions are favorable, wins exchanges narrowly, and exits before damage compounds. This makes exchange resolution non-negotiable. He fights in short bursts, not extended narratives. Defensively, reaction-based tools are no longer reliable. Late slips and pull counters are minimized. Instead, Holmes leans into predictability and structure. A 42-year-old heavyweight cannot sustain long stretches of lateral movement. The solution is a heavier reliance on long guard, catches, parries, and physical controls that clog lanes and simplifies reads. Defense becomes about denial, not evasion. Physical control becomes essential. With diminished athleticism, Holmes uses pins, posts, and frames to slow the fight to a manageable pace. He avoids extended clinches, which drain energy and invite accumulation. Instead, he works in short inside sequences, using frames and compact punches, then creates space with posts. He spends the minimum energy required to prevent Mercer from spending his energy explosively. At this stage, experience becomes a weapon. Holmes understands that winning is an act of round accumulation, not momentum chasing. He concedes rounds when necessary to avoid damage, win others by slim margins, and never overextends. That's not passivity, that's valuation. A veteran understanding what a round is worth when time, durability, and recover are no longer infinite. This is longevity as a skill metric, not survival, not nostalgia, functional adaptation under constraint.
Phil Newman scores the bout 117 to 112. Eugene Grant scores the bout 117 to 111. John Potteray has it 115 to 113 for the winner by unanimous decision from Easton, Pennsylvania, the former heavyweight champion of the world, Larry.
Holmes was unfairly compared to Muhammad Ali during his reign, largely because of proximity, not equivalence. Pundits of the era, including Howard Cosell and Gil Clancy, often frame Holmes as a lesser version of something that was never meant to be replicated. There will never be another Muhammad Ali. Much of what defined him was intangible, instinctive, and inseparable from his personality. Those qualities cannot be taught, systemized, or reliably reproduced. Larry Holmes is different. Everything that made Holmes great was built on structure, decision-making, and repeatable control. His success did not depend on gifts that vanished with time or context. It depended on skills that could be trained, refined, and sustained. Larry Holmes didn't dominate the heavyweight division by being the most dangerous man in the ring. He did it by being the most competent one.
Fight fam. Boxing is called the sweet science for a reason. Every slip, every counter, every trap, it's all hidden in the details. At Boxing Gems, we break down those details frame by frame so fans can see the art behind the fight. If you enjoy our YouTube film studies and want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, Patreon is the place. It helps us keep producing high quality breakdowns without worrying about algorithms, and it gives you exclusive access to the content that can't make it on the YouTube. Get extended live stream breakdowns with more detail and analysis. Ask your own questions in the 24/7 chats, decide what fights or fighters we cover, and get personalized private analysis. Your support means we can keep studying the sport we love and showing why boxing is the most beautiful science. Join the Boxing Gems community on Patreon and let's keep breaking down the fight game together. This is Ryan, professional boxing analyst and founder of Boxing Gems Film Study. Film don't lie.